Welcome to our pod. And by that, I mean on Wednesdays we read. I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are usually two best friends who do a deep dive into a new book series, one book at a time. But it is Tuesday where you are listening. So that means we're talking about TV.
And we're three best friends.
Because welcome to the podcast, CM Caplan. Connor, welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Connor is the author of The Fall Is All There Is and
The Sword in the Street.
The Sword in the Street. I was going to say,
no one knows that one's not
your
even
other
available
book
for sale anymore.
It's not available for sales anymore.
No, I pulled it. I pulled it a little while back, like earlier this year. Just it was published a few years ago, and I haven't marketed it in ages, so it never gets traction anyway. So I was like, let me just pull all the focus into the one that's won all the awards.
Well, The Fall Is All There Is, we covered on this podcast, and
yes,
we loved it. So listeners, be sure to pick that one up, and also look for the Sword in the Street if you try to find it.
Available near you in all third-party sellers.
Well, sorry for my discombobulation because I introduced you so poorly. Laura and I are actually in the same area. We told Connor this off air, but Laura's at my house and she's recording from my normal recording space, and I'm recording from my fiance's office. So I think both of us will be a little discombobulated today.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
But my favorite thing about introductions is having to pretend that we haven't already been talking for several minutes beforehand.
We just started talking. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we're only like 60 seconds into an actual call. We have not been talking at all.
Yeah, no.
We've not conferred prior to this.
This is all brand new information to us. We just made you immediately get into recording. We said you cannot
I actually
speak.
Dropped the link in my DMs like 5 minutes ago. I had no idea I would be here.
Connor has no idea what we're discussing today.
Connor's online. They're going to be on the podcast today.
But
That's how we get our guests.
The first season of FX show Shogun, which follows the collision of two ambitious men from different worlds. John Blackthorne, a risk-taking English sailor who ends up shipwrecked in Japan, and Lord Toranaga, a shrewd, powerful daimyo. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing anything. At odds with his own dangerous political rivals. So we all watched this show. Luckily, Connor did before we surprised them with the recording. But yeah, so what is everyone's experience with the show so far? Laura, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. So this show is based on Shogun, the novel, I believe, by James Clavell. I had not read the novel, so when people were saying, oh, this is like an excellent adaptation, I have no frame of reference to know if it is or not. So I am solely just going off of my own experience just watching the show, and I really liked it. I thought it was really good. I had previously started watching it, and then I stopped at like 3 episodes in because I was like, I have to really pay attention to this because there are subtitles that I have to read. And unfortunately, I'm not good at paying attention to things all the time. So I was able to make it all the way through, and I really enjoyed it. I think that it's just visually stunning. The music is awesome, and the acting is phenomenal. So that's my brief experience.
Connor, what was your experience with the show and or the novel?
I had a similar experience with the subtitles. I hadn't read the book. I'd heard of the book a few years beforehand, but I heard the show was introduced to me by people last year having discourse about the subtitles or something, and then I heard that, and then people were like, "Yeah, it's really good," and it was one of those things that I meant to check it out, and I was halfway in. I was sort of like, I started with episode 1, sort of watching it. And then I got halfway in and I was like, I have no clue what's been happening. Half of this is in Japanese. I don't know what they're saying. I've only been half glancing at this. I had to kind of start over as well. It was like, oh, I have to like put various stuff down that I'm multitasking with and actually pay attention to this.
I also have not read the book. I really didn't know about Shogun until it kind of popped up on Hulu one weekend when I was at my dad's. And a lot of times I'll pick a random show that I think my dad would like and I would enjoy and just like put it on. So I threw this on. We watched like 2 episodes. My dad and I fell asleep during the second episode because we were just like, it was late and you have to read subtitles. But I remember thinking like, oh, I really like this. But I also had a little bit of a hurdle with the subtitles where I was like, oh, when you want to watch it, like I'm a big multitasker when I watch TV.
Same.
And so it was hard for me to be like, oh yeah, we're definitely watching an episode of Shogun tonight. So I can read subtitles. Like I think it was just a little bit harder. But I did like the experience of it. I always think that like subtitled shows are some great things to look into. I've watched other subtitled shows before and enjoyed them. I think it's just like it's
like a shift you got to do.
Yeah, it's very much a shift that you're not used to, and I'm not used to working that brain muscle as much. So, this show is very new. It just came out this year. And it also feels like a show that like everyone agrees is fantastic, but it's not like it just won 18 of the 25 awards it was nominated for at the Emmys, but it's also
almost unheard of.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was a record.
Yeah. But it also seems like something that not a lot of people are like super talking about. Like it doesn't have the same like, House of the Dragon vibes or like that big push. Like it seems underlying and a little bit more of a critical darling than like an audience is a huge like pulling for this show.
Yeah. It seems like a maybe season 1 of Game of Thrones kind of thing. I don't think it or did Game of Thrones get really big? I was
I feel like Game of Thrones is like pretty big in its 3rd season. I feel like that's when I noticed like some of my relatives started watching it, and they obviously did not read the book, but they were like, oh, we're such Game of Thrones fans now. And I'm like, that was when I was like really bitter. You didn't even read the books. You're not real fans.
Are you even a fan? Laura sitting there in her college dorm being like, how dare you?
Me having read all the Game of Thrones books. Angry.
So I do feel, and it originally was just supposed to be a mini series. So this was originally, there was a 1980s mini series. This is a book that came out in the 1970s, and it was supposed to be a mini series this time, but I think it got such good like push that now it does have a season 2 that they will be filming, which is, I think it'll be pretty new because there is no
there's no source material for it, so that'll be interesting.
There's a little bit of source material from what I read about the book. Like there's a lot more to the like upcoming war that's played out, and I don't think we got as much of that in the series. I do know that the book is a little bit spoilers, guys. We're gonna be spoiling the TV show. We're gonna be spoiling a little bit of the book. So sorry if that's not the energy you want. Can maybe come back, go watch 10 episodes of a fantastic TV show. But in the book, I guess like there's a huge buildup to the war, and then you never read about the war. They just like end before they go into battle, and like
that's shocking,
right? They're like, and so I read a scathing review where they're like, I loved this book, and then 1,000 pages later, I'm like, oh, I get to read this book too and read about this war we've been reading about. And he's like, there is no Shogun 2. This is it. This is all you get. And so I do think, what a wild time to be like. As a person who doesn't read a lot of action, I can't imagine reading a book where it's like, we're going to get to the action eventually. And then it's like, well, and then there's just like a little footnote where it's like, the war was fought and so won.
That's so strange. I wonder what you guys think, though, because I don't know of a lot of people who have read Shogun, the book. No. And so I feel like this book maybe was benefiting from the fact that not a lot of people had read the source material, because I feel like it's so often in fandoms that like people who really adore the original source work are going to be upset with whatever is created, whether it's a TV show or a movie, because they're going to complain that it's not a one-to-one adaptation or what have you, So I feel like because there were not as many people that I had known of, or that this book wasn't as wildly popular maybe as some of the other books that are currently like very, very popular. I'm thinking like Percy Jackson is a deep new Disney show that a lot of people have been like, oh, had different opinions about the adaptation there. But I feel like this one, I didn't know of many people that were like, oh yeah, I love Shogun the book. And so I feel like the fans coming into watching this show were maybe kinder because they weren't comparing it to a source material.
I do wonder about that, because it does seem like it was popular in its time. But and I was watching this like thinking, wow, this is such a breath of fresh air, because it's not like repurposed material. I'm like, but it technically is. It's just not repurposed material for you specifically. Like,
well, and especially if there's been another show. Yeah.
And so this is just redoing something, but I think it's redoing something in such a unique way where fans are like so starved for something new and fresh. And this wasn't like a huge, well-known property, like you were saying, Laura. So then people are watching it with like fresh eyes and seeing the politics for the first time, or like, Connor, I know you said, I can't remember if it was before we started recording, but you were like, oh, no, you on recording. Sorry. You said I had to like rewatch the first episode and like learn who these people were. I think that's like such a unique thing that we don't get to have much anymore. And so I think it does add to the enjoyment, Laura.
Yeah,
I think they're
absolutely.
looking for a new Game of Thrones kind of thing.
Yeah.
That we have, I mean, we have House of the Dragon, and I have not watched that, so I don't know how it is in terms of quality or how it stacks up against especially early Game of Thrones. But it seems like we're still kind of looking for whatever that the cultural juggernaut on that scale would be. And this seems like it's slated to maybe fill those shoes, or it hits a similar sort of niche without being as overwhelmingly everywhere.
Yeah.
I agree that I feel like everybody's trying to reach that milestone of being the next Game of Thrones, kind of like without even just like saying we want to be the next Game of Thrones. That's what most TV shows are hoping for, is to develop these really big fandoms and be able to have their shows on for seasons and seasons and seasons, and be able to like get the money and the budget to have multiple episodes too, where they're not just like, you get 6 this season, see what you can do. And then they're really in like a crunch because they're trying to fit a lot into a short period of time, and then the work suffers from it. So I feel like when we have these like Hulu or whoever, FX, that's creating a show, they are kind of reaching for that, and they're like, we've got 10 episodes, let's give it our best effort and see if we can create a great fan base with this.
But on that, like on a different side of the same coin, I also feel like we're really starved for good soap opera type shows where like this is a very like I saw it slotted in as a soap opera type historical fiction. And I do think we also don't have a ton of the, like we have the Bridgerton series, which is more romance and like different alternative history, but this is like very soap opera based, like
this
people.
Is the forbidden love type thing.
Yeah.
Like what? So like, I don't know if either of you watched the Thornbirds, but
no.
The Thornbirds is like an old miniseries that was a very much like drama and romantic vibes about a priest who ends up getting into a relationship with a woman. And I remember that show was like wildly popular at the time. And I know that, I think it was my grandma who introduced me to the show. She let me watch so many things I shouldn't have watched.
That's amazing.
But that I think was kind of the vibe that a lot of these like dramatic series that you would say are like soap opera types kind of go for, where there's this forbidden love where that it's not necessarily always a priest, but like in this show we have kind of a cultural divide that is keeping them apart, and a race divide that is keeping these people apart, and a sense of belonging that is keeping these people apart, and whether or not our protagonists should be involved with people. So while there's this overarching like political storyline, there's also these undertones of romance and will they, won't they, oh but they shouldn't, and I think people really dig that.
I actually, when I was watching it, I remember thinking there's something almost, I feel like Austin isn't quite the right pull, but I was really surprised by this about the show, that there's this focus on sort of like backroom sort of conspiracies, and just like really with a huge focus on like etiquette and like court and manners and things like that. And I thought it was going to be more just like I thought it was going to be a lot of a grittier sort of war story, and there are parts where it gets kind of like violent and gory, but so much of it was just sort of like people in rooms having meetings and stuff like that. And I love any sort of drama that can make stuff like that compelling, because that's really hard to do.
Well, it's very political, because like the start of the show, I mean, I'm sure most people have watched it, but the start of the show is like the shogunate has like died, and he like dispersed his control to these 5 regions, and one of them seems to have more power than the others, and the others do not trust him, and so they want to take him down, and it's all about him trying to like maneuver things so that he can keep power and like keep his control and maybe even more control as he goes on. And we kind of see Blackstone, who in the original book was a much more featured character. Of course,
Blackthorn, Hannah, I just caught it.
Oh my gosh, you did catch it. Okay, I keep calling him Blackstone, but he was like the main character in the book, and it's very Western focused on him and his experiences. And like we see now in 2024, they're revisiting it and being like, maybe he's the most boring character, and we just need him to sit there and look shocked.
I was gonna say.
And so they started actually bringing up these people who were part of the novel and really shifting focus to them and saying like, no, this is where the drama is. This is where the interesting parts are. And so that's where we get Toranaga's like actual viewpoint in this more. And like, as well as Mariko, who is the female character who in the book was just meant to be Blackthorn's love interest. And they're just like, nope, she is going to be a dynamic character. She is going to be like someone who is seen in high regard. And like, yes, she was kind of those things, but she wasn't really in the book. And so it is interesting to know that like some of the best parts of the show were not fully on the page. They were like happening in the background of the pages. Like it was more about Blackthorn. And I think it was a very effective decision to be like, maybe he's just a boring white man. Like,
I think that you're absolutely right that the way that they played the show. So I just want to say though, like this, we're going to probably be talking a lot about like culture, the Japanese culture and everything. This is, don't watch fictional TV shows to learn about Japanese culture. I'm just throwing that out there. We also are not taking this as like historically accurate. Like this, we all know this is fiction. So people listening, don't be like, well, that's not actually correct, you three white people. So don't.
Well, and also the source material was taken from a white man in the 70s, writing about a very specific view of Japanese culture. They did make some changes to the TV show. Apparently, an assassination attempt that took place early on in the original source material was a ninja, and they were kind of like, hey, those didn't exist like right then, so please don't use that as a plot point. And so there was stuff like that as well. So,
but I think it was a wise choice, like you're saying, Hannah, to come at this from the standpoint of this is a white character and he's just here. He's not the center of our show that we're like, oh, he's going to become the Shogun. Like, no, we don't care about what happens to John Blackthorn's ship. Like, no. And I think that it's interesting the way that the show, like in the first episode, kind of throws people, I shouldn't say throws people, but makes it seem like he's going to be maybe this really important character that we need to focus on, and that he's maybe going to be the Shogun or whatever, you know. I like the spin that they did with the first episode to kind of make you think that John Blackthorn is really going to be super important, but then they focused more on the actual meat of the plot, which is the Japanese political powers and how the different daimyos interacted with each other and the different clans interacted with each other, which is the important, more interesting part of this story.
Yeah.
It's weird. I feel like Blackthorn got more boring as time went on.
Right.
The first few episodes, he was like really interesting because he's on the back foot. He has no idea what this culture is, what's going on. He has no way of bargaining, and he has to. I really, really like the scene where like the dude is translating, and then he has to like, and he realizes that the guy is a Catholic, and he doesn't like him because he's a Protestant, so he's not giving reliable information, so he has to stamp on the cross and everything. That was like that was an early scene of like, oh, these people know what they're doing. This is really compelling. And then as time went on and we focused more and more on like the more compelling characters and stuff, I think specifically around the point, I forget the Spanish dude's name. But around the time that guy came in, I was like, oh my God, someone interesting, an interesting character who has fun, witty asides. I hope he's in the rest of this movie, and then he's like never seen again except for
we don't ever see him then.
No.
Yeah, that was something I noticed too. Is like the show didn't hold on to characters too much, where they were like, we're gonna put a ton of focus on this one. It was like, no, here's just someone to have a couple one-liners, and then they're gone. Like, we're not gonna care about them too much.
Well, I also
Yeah.
think it's like it's so smart because if you think about it, this is it's a show for a Western audience,
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
it feels like the first couple episodes were like hand holding
Mhm.
Yeah.
Americans and being like, okay,
Really, they
here's a
were.
show you
It's
will
like,
enjoy, and then
okay,
like
white people, come watch this show.
it's it's like he's like a walking MacGuffin almost. It's
mhm.
like he's basically the thing that everyone's kind of vying over and intriguing over, but like he's not the thing that everyone's tuning in for. There's other people who have like more like specific goals and actions that they're trying to achieve that are actually like the more compelling.
Yes. Because from like the beginning, he's saying like his goal, like he ends up stranded, he's shipwrecked in Japan, and his goal is to take on the Portuguese Catholics, and that's his main goal. Him and like five guys are gonna take down the all these Portuguese Catholics,
You
which
see, they have
bold.
cannons.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Sure. But and they're all dying of scurvy, so yeah,
Yeah.
they'll definitely do that. But it's interesting like how the show well, I think it's interesting how the show portrays Blackthorn where it's not like he's treated as a joke, but as we go along, he becomes less and less important, but at the same time, I do think they treat his character with some respect
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
we see how he's willing to adapt to the culture and learn the language, how he actually tries, how he learns to respect the different characters. And I wish they would have given him a better haircut because like
Laura really hated that
I
haircut.
hated his haircut so much. Like they well, first of all, we learned like early on he doesn't like to bathe very often, which gross.
I mean, but
But
that was English practice. I think that
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
honestly.
yeah.
gross.
Uh
But but I thought it was interesting for like all of the costuming and like hair decisions that were so excellent that they could not have given John Blackthorne a better
Cosmo.
haircut.
The actor Cosmo.
Yeah, his name
Uh,
is Cosmo Jarvis, which is such a British name. But
well, I do think that that kind of like goes to some of the beauty of this show that like
mhm,
it's not I kept watching it and thinking like, well, this is the first time I've seen this type of like historical drama where the Western view was not the focus for the audience. It was
yeah.
actually like the Eastern view is what is the norm here. So like
Mhm.
people are
Yeah.
constantly commenting on the fact that like Blackthorn is disgusting because he does not shower. Blackthorn is disgusting because he will eat rotting meat and gravy. And like they are clean people. They are people who eat like a very specific diet. And like they'll say like they don't want to be rude, but like he thinks he's being respectful a lot. And they're all like, you are so fucking rude. And it's because he doesn't understand the culture and that's the norm. So every
Mhm.
faux pas that we see that could make sense to us, we're immediately told like, nope, nope, actually that's wrong. And I think that that's so unique because usually you have in before the now period or before the show, a lot of times it's like someone walking in being like, you guys are wrong. And they're all like, we're wrong. And it's like, no, here they're just like, no, you're gross. What are you
Even
talking
like the way
about?
that they're like commenting on the way that he eats, they're like, okay,
Yeah.
He's like a baby.
don't eat
What
your
was he
food like
doing
that.
with the bird or the like pheasant or whatever? I had no clue what was going on with that. Like, why was he leaving it to rot?
So he said it's like a delicate, like I think it was like that's how I think the like interpretation, you would have to fact check me on historical accuracy, is like that was how they would do meat. So it's like a delicacy to have the meat like hang and be
Mhm.
prepared that way and get like tenderized. But you have
my
to, but they're
God.
like, but it will rot. And he's like, yeah, it's a delicacy. And like that's he's supposed to be like, this is such an honor. And for listeners, this is a scene where like someone gives him a pheasant as a gift and he tells no one to touch it or they die. And
Because he
he's like,
doesn't know how to translate well enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to say like, please don't, it's important you don't touch it. And then someone does
Yeah.
touch it who like sacrificed himself because it was so disgusting and because it was like hurting the morale
Bringing
of the
flies and
town.
things like that.
Mhm.
And so the town like came together and they're like, well, he said he's going to die soon. He's willing to do this. So like we're maintaining his honor by following his instructions while making sure that we're doing what we need to do as a society. And it was like, it's supposed to be this moment where he's like, well, you guys are so barbaric. And they're like, well, it was your poor choice of words that did this, and like words matter. So actually
Right.
you have to take responsibility. And it's like a very shifting, opposing perspective that you understand, but you can like see how it all played out and why it played out that way.
Yeah, there's very much this like talk of like when you're talking about like words mattering and like honor also, and like honoring the people that surround you and honoring like your culture in your home, and I think and honoring each other. And so I think in that situation, like he, like you said, Hannah, felt just absolutely disgusted that they would kill someone for taking this pheasant down. And they're like, well, he died an honorable death by serving our community and helping us to get rid of this. And it's hard for Blackthorn to be like, okay, I guess that's honorable. Like, sure.
I think they had to take that approach because like so much of the show is focused on like it has to like it can't do the like the Western thing of like look at this backwards culture. Well, we need the white man. And we're like no, they can't do that because of how much the show like they can't do any sort of Last Samurai kind of bullshit. Because the show is so focused on like these people. It's like the politicking is like they're in some sort of cultural logic puzzle where they need to maneuver themselves into a specific custom that will leverage someone else to do this other thing, or else they might be in a bad position. And it's like it's this really intricate web of like expectations that they need to navigate, and it's not going to work the same way if they portray that as like backwards or in any way.
Exactly. Well, and this book is the book is technically based on a like some historical figures immersed in a very historical fiction novel. Yeah. So like very dude bro of like, I wrote a book, but it's not for women because it's based on actual historical events, like something like that. But
oh no,
I'm guessing that's me just supposing just based on my experience with historical fiction and how men view women genres. But like because it was based on historically accurate figures, I think the original book was told about this person who did become a samurai, who was a white person. But now in 2024, we're a little bit more willing to actually look at that and be like, yeah, he probably was just in the right place at the right time and he made one leader happy. So it was just like, oh, well, he's been around long enough to be helpful. So I'm going to give him these lands. And like it's pointed out by the people around them where it's like, he's kind of just this Lord's plaything, and like Toranaga just likes him and thinks he's amusing, so he's gonna keep.
Toranaga even says that towards the end.
Yeah,
the only reason that he's alive is I find him funny.
Yeah, that's all, and it's good because I think it like helps again with like. I think one of the most ineffective parts of this entire series was the love story between Mariko and Blackthorn.
Do we consider it a love story, or do we consider that more of a like? I want to talk more about Mariko's relationship with her husband Buntaro, but I feel like the relationship between John and Mariko is almost one-sided in my mind, where John is very much starting to fall for her, and I feel like she doesn't see him romantically necessarily, but is like very much like, this is somebody who actually treats me with respect. I don't think I love him, but I can appreciate that I'm working with this person and we're learning from each other and learning about each other's cultures. But I also just kind of felt like their whole storyline was more, in my mind, I got more from it seeing how he was growing and learning about their culture, because as we get towards the end of the season, we see how his relationship with their culture and their customs has really changed, and how he even offers to be a second for Mariko when she is going to attempt suicide, because he is starting to understand more that like her possible death and like damnation could be crushing to her based on her religion. So it's interesting to see their relationship play out. But to me, it's almost like I thought of it as less of a mutual love story and more of a one-sided love story, where he was in love and very much just like learning about the world through her.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that look at it. I think you're spot on, because a lot of the times he would have moments where like Mariko in the penultimate episode ends up sacrificing herself for the greater good of everything. And he has a moment where he's like, don't leave me. And I was like, dude, you two have had sex 2 times. She doesn't care about you. Like, she's not going to give up her culture and her honor for like a man she barely knows. Like,
and that's what made me think, like, yeah, I don't think she cares about him the way that he really cares about her. Because even after they sleep together the first time, he's like, hey, you want to talk about last night? And she's just like, what's there to talk about?
It was a good time.
The husband threw me off. The characterization for her husband was weird. Like he's portrayed in one episode as like someone who's willing to like go down against like a bottleneck of people. It's like swarming just to give them a bit more time. And then he shows up and it's like, no, he's pathetic and he's always been pathetic and he's gonna beat up his wife, and then this man has to come in and fucking it felt weirdly inconsistent to me in a way where it's like, well, which is it? Because like how are you straddling both?
I honestly, I felt like his whole storyline made sense to me because he was maybe one of the most interesting characters in my mind, Buntaro, because he is, and just gonna start off by saying, do not condone any of the abuse that he puts on Mariko at all. Like, I'm not condoning this, but I'm just doing a character assessment here. And we see that this is somebody who is dealing with PTSD, obviously, but has this really fraught relationship with his wife where she has, from the get-go, treated him with coldness, and he does not have an understanding of her. Like, the two of them do not understand each other, and he comes into their relationships trying and figure her out at first, and then it becomes more of a, when she continues to rebuff him and treat him coldly because she is so depressed with her own situation, that he starts to just kind of build up this wall, really, and he works in jealousy into an anger into his whole feeling towards her, into all of his feelings towards her, and then it becomes abuse. And it's, I don't want to put the blame on Mariko. That's not who deserves the blame, but he's a very complicated character. Buntaro is a very complicated character who's dealing with all of these different things that he's probably never going to get resolution for. And even when he offers like to make her tea or offers to, you know what, let's commit suicide together if that's what you want, death so bad. And she reveals to him, like, you do not understand me. I do not want us to just like Romeo and Juliet it together. Like, that's not what's happening here. He has this immense grief, and I feel like is just grieving over realizing that he can never provide her with what she wants, and that he's in this marriage that from the get-go was doomed to be a failure. And he just feels a lot of grief for what I think could have been. But it's a really complicated character, and I thought the actor did a phenomenal job with his portrayal, because really interesting, and he just had the perfect facial expressions, the coldness, the like terrifying nature of him. He did a great job, but I thought that Buntaro's character made a lot of sense.
Well, I think it also makes sense from a historical like accuracy thing, because he is a character.
He sees her as property.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a very misogynistic society.
Yes.
In his mind, he's done everything right. Like, that's every time he talks, he's like, I handle things with honor. I do things correctly. And we find out that Mariko's backstory is kind of tragic. Her father was this warlord who killed the prior like head heir person. And then he had to commit seppuku on him, as well as like kill his entire family, but she was already married off at that time. And so her husband has this moment where he's like, well, I could bring shame upon her. She has this shame brought on her based on her lineage, but I'm going to spare her. And then the rest of his life is being like, I spared you. Why don't you love me? And she's like, I think honor is dying with my family, and you will not let me do that. And they have this push and pull where he thinks she should be like so happy that he did the right thing, that she should feel like some type of way towards him. And it's very much a moment of like, you cannot control the way people feel. And that's where that jealousy you're talking about, Laura, comes in, where he's like, she looks at Blackthorn the way she never looked at me, and I've done everything right, and he's this barbarian. And she's like, well, I find him intellectually stimulating, and I find the fact that he is like different than something I've met before to be a little bit more tantalizing to me because I care about that stuff. And then there's that moment where I laughed so often about that scene where he's like, let's do this. Let's commit seppuku together. And she's like, you do not seem to understand that the life I wanted to escape from was your life. And doing this with you would taint the entire experience. And I'm like, what a way to just like bring someone down where
It's
he's
so
like,
crushing.
Literally.
like, it's
Oh
so
my gosh.
harsh to be like, I would never commit suicide with you. Like, I wanted permission to do it, but not with you. Like,
Yeah, and it's so sad too because it's like I think he is trying to come into the relationship at times with like I'm trying to be understanding. I'm
Mhm.
finally letting you commit suicide. We'll do it together,
Yeah.
thinking that oh that's what you want and she's just like no, you don't
You
understand. I
can't be
don't
here for
want to be
this.
with you even in death. Like I don't want to be with you and it's really rough to watch him go through that. But you're right, Hannah. It's like an interesting take because he does see her as property. He does see her as like someone that he thinks he's putting all this effort into who doesn't show any gratefulness at all for what he's given her. And so he's very confused and misunderstanding her. And then again, dealing with his own PTSD and a lot of other things too that all contribute to his abuse of her.
Yeah.
It's the scene where they're having dinner was one of the most delicious scenes to watch, I think. One of the things that I really thought was interesting that they had the angle of this idea of like this backwards foreigner coming from honorable women kind of a thing. And this idea that this is like he's fighting against his own sort of emasculation the way he sees it,
Mhm.
and it's just and then the only way he can conceive to try and reclaim it is through like the everything with the bow and violence, and because he can't and because he's not used to like drinking such incredible quantities because of those cultural differences and everything.
Mhm.
And it's just this incredible it's this there's like a couple different tensions layered throughout the scene. And it was just like one of my favorite things of watching the various sort of threads that the show has introduced sort of come together.
Because in that scene, like I was so frustrated with Blackthorn because like at the same time it shows all of his deficiencies where he's
yes.
also doing the same things where
He's
like
egging him
Yeah.
on.
yeah, and he has moments where he's
Absolutely.
like, you and I have agreements. We both think our wives are our property. And it's like he definitely thinks that. There's never a moment, but he also
Right.
feels some type of ownership over Mariko because they had a moment together.
Mhm.
And she's sitting there being like, look, I can do things independent of my marriage and still be very much in my marriage. I'm not going to like, I'm going to show honor to my husband. I'm going to do the things I need to do. And he doesn't seem to have that understanding where he like gets into a dick contest where he's like, let's both
Yeah.
drink a ton of sake when she keeps warning him, like, you do not seem to understand what's going on here. Please stop. And his own ego and his own power takes precedent over her, which is also where I'm like, dude, she's not going to pick you over like her honor
Literally.
and country.
That's his whole story is just like getting into a situation and like you don't know what's going on here. Please stop. And then he just barrels through anyway.
Yep.
There's even when he gets to the Capitol and he's just like, I don't think I can trust you to translate for me because you're Catholic. And then he does, and it's just sort of like, you didn't know that what he would
Yeah.
do.
Oh yeah.
It's just he's constantly making assumptions about the situation with inaccurate information, and then his whole point and his whole like device in the story is like he'll come in and blow up a scene and then walk away not having learned a single thing.
Well, and even like the way he describes things, like I really liked in the first couple episodes where he's pointing out that like, hey, the Catholics think they have control over you. They da 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 da. But like if you actually research into the historical accuracy of that, like the Western countries didn't colonize the Japanese culture as much because there wasn't enough people there. Like they didn't have enough people to do it. And so even he's being a little bit disingenuous by saying like, they say they have control over you. And it's like, well, I think they say they have like an outlet into you, but they're more political in Japan than they were in other nations that they like fully colonized because of the distance and because of that. So you see that like Blackthorn in his own right is like not trustworthy and he's not helpful.
Estimating, or not overestimating, but overrepresenting the amount of their ability to enact their plans and everything.
Exactly. So it's wild.
I will say though, just like a last couple thoughts that I had on Buntaro was him having to be the one that helped his father. He was the second, and is seppuku? Is that how you say it?
Seppuku, yeah,
seppuku, which is basically a suicide,
or seppuku. Is it seppuku?
I think it's seppuku.
Seppuku, which is basically a suicide for disrespect or dishonoring your community, your clan, your superiors. And Buntaro's father was one of Toranaga's like closest friends and advisors. And towards the end, when they're trying to like figure out like what is going on with your plan here, Toranaga, this doesn't seem right. He is supposed to commit this suicide because he has disrespected Toranaga, and Buntaro has to be the one to chop his father's head off and it to decapitate his own father. And it's devastating because it's like, why does he have to go through even more? Like he is, you can just feel how fraught he is with even having to do this and to continue to be like, quote unquote, rising to the occasion in order to serve his lord by even killing your father is just, I can't even imagine what you would go through. But then I felt like it was such an interesting way that they ended with his character, where he and John at the end of the season are working together for a common good of helping their lord. They're still both serving their lord. So it's a weird way that the two of them like have come around and are both in the end serving their lord and doing the honorable thing.
Well, and the one thing I do want to note about seppuku is it is actually seen, I believe, based on my own, cursory look into it, is seen as an honorary way to die. So like you do allow people to do that if you commit treason, if you do those things. And so it was a moment of like him respecting his father's wishes. And then we find out later that the father and Tornagu had an agreement to do that, where he was like, I have to do this, I have to stand up to you. So they think that they've actually won. And it was this like honorable thing, but you are asking the most
the
out
other
of your
characters
child.
Didn't know that is the thing, because they had to make it seem real. So when we went on this journey with Buntaro, where first we thought he died, and then he's back, he's made his way out, and he's had all of this up and down with his wife and Blackthorn, and then to go on to kind of get out of some of the Blackthorn drama, but then he's brought right back into the thick of it, where they're like, well, now you have to be the one to decapitate your father. Unfortunately, it's like, oh my gosh, can he not get a break?
It is one of the things I have seen some criticism over from the show, is like, because it was made by a white writer, they said that like there does seem to be some still like romanticizing of Japanese culture from white people, of like, oh, seppuku, like it happens a lot in the show. And people pointed out like it was not as like often as you see it portrayed in the show. And it is kind of
all
like
the time, like
they were
left
doing
and right.
And right. And so they were like, there is this weird romanticization of like, it's something we don't understand that happened, so we have to watch it over and over again. And there was some like claim to say like, well, if you're going to take this Western book written by a white man, you're going to get flavors of this, and it's going to be hard to iron those out. And and that is also where some of it was historically inaccurate, where like Mariko goes to commit seppuku on herself, but women didn't do it that way. They cut their own neck along the like carotid arteries type thing, and that was how they did it. So they didn't do like the belly, and of course they changed
probably
it
because of an exposure thing. I would assume.
Yeah, and so like that was kind of what typically happened, but I'm sure it looks better in the show to kind of have her treated on even footing, which is also something I think they did really well with the show, is like Mariko's character is incredibly important and integral to so much of this plot that I think in other versions she wouldn't have been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What did everyone think of Fuji-sama, who is Buntaro's niece, and she ends up being the consort to John? What did everyone think of her?
I'm trying to think. Sorry, if you have more thoughts, go ahead.
No. I can go. I thought she was such an interesting character because we see at the beginning of the show, like her husband and child's death is like this catalyst for everything that happens. And so what we're really seeing is like I really liked about the show, there are themes of how like masculinity handles things versus like femininity in certain ways. And like she grieves and she is like supported by the women around her, where men are often like told in the show like that's not for us to discuss. Like you see the men emoting, which I think is unique for, and I think a good move for 2024 when these characters are committing seppuku. You don't have this like Asian man sitting there stoically being like, I'm ready to kill my father. You see that it matters. You see that this has ramifications. But there's also like with Fuji, she is often like supported by the women around her and told how to keep a brave face, how to navigate all of this. And there are just certain moments where she still like keeps her head strong, but you see that she's in pain in a way that we don't see other characters. So like she has this moment that I didn't like at the end, like Blackthorn and her sit in a boat and she like scatters her child and husband's ashes. And I didn't like it because Blackthorn is like, this is what my world does to honor people. And I'm like, well, that's not her way of like, do you know if that's her way of honoring? Please don't like make her have your type of funeral. But I do think like she was an interesting character because she never bought into any of Blackthorn's things. She only saw him as a barbarian, but they also had a kinship together. And she has moments where she's like, well, he seems nice enough. He doesn't force me to have sex with him. So that's nice.
There's like a parallel going on between the two of them almost. So they're both sort of pawns being like shepherded to various, they're horribly, horribly traumatized and just having to go from place to place to achieve to help other people achieve their ambitions. And I think it's interesting the sort of sleight of hand the show does of like you kind of see that with her from the start, of like she had that she doesn't necessarily have agency even from the first scene, and you kind of, whereas they frame it a lot with Blackthorn initially that he's going to have some agency, but then with the reveal at the end it's like they've kind of always been in the same position where it's like he's like he's having to go to these various sort of like locations and like endure all these horrible things in a very similar way to how she is.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting from like her. I found her character to be really interesting, honestly, even though she was maybe not one of the more major characters, because she is brought into Blackthorn's home and she sees this as just like, oh my gosh, this is so disgusting. I have to serve this person. What an embarrassment. He's hanging like rotten animals outside of our home. Like, this is gross. He does a lot of gross things. He doesn't bathe. He doesn't do all these things. And I have to try and like maintain this person. But it's kind of cool to see how the two of them grow in kinship and respect for one another. Whereas even at the beginning, like Mariko like says to John, like, I think you need to treat Fuji-sama better. Like, she deserves better than the way that you're treating her and talking about her. She has had a hard life. She works really hard. And we learned that she also doesn't really know the entire history of her background and thinks that like even these swords that she's offering to Blackthorn from her father's were these honorable things. And they're like, no, this is a lie that she's been told. And but it's honorable for you to receive these from her because that's something that means a lot to her. And it's kind of cool to see the relationship between John and Fuji grow, even if it's not always like Hannah, like you were saying, like him trying to impose his character on her. If we don't look at that and just kind of focus on the way that their relationship grows, we see these people who are growing in understanding and respect for one another. And I actually kind of thought that their parting, I thought it was an interesting way to show people who were saying goodbye to one another and almost like a thank you for like a thank you for being a friend down the road and back again. And so I thought it was kind of a unique way to show their departure from one another, where they never became lovers or anything, but they grew in respect for one another and learned a lot from each other, and also were able to sit in their grief and understand each other's grief more than any of the other characters were able to.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I also thought it was a little too romantic cheesy with the she's finally over it now, the death of her child and husband,
I'm
that
all better.
she's
I
going to
did.
release her ashes. And it's like, no, but it's also a way for him to suddenly be free of his grief over Mariko. And it's like a little too convenient that that happened and a little too romantic. But I do think it was a nice nod to the way that their relationship progressed and the way that the two of them grew together.
I do like that in that moment, he does try to have some type of ownership over her a little bit. And he's like, you can't leave. And she's like, oh, you have no power here anymore.
I'm sorry, my time serving my lord is up.
Right.
And I loved that because I thought it was also like such a good moment for her, who has been this pawn for people. And she's kind of like, my service is done. I get to do what I need to do. Like,
Right.
you don't get to have this power over me anymore. And I was like, great. I
Yes.
loved that ending for her. I didn't need them sitting in a boat and him being like, this is how you dispose of bodies in my culture. And her being like, I guess so. Like,
Yeah, it was just too convenient and a little too like romanticized their
Yeah.
like getting rid of their loved ones' things or ashes, and like, okay, like, but I also liked it from the standpoint of like like a departure, a farewell to of the two characters with each other.
I definitely liked her character a lot. I thought her character had a lot of the similar backstories. It was good to have her because I felt like there's a lot of different characters who are foils to other characters.
Yes.
And I felt like her and Mariko were like very much foiled by Oshiba. I don't know if that's how you
I think so.
Okay. Oshiba, who like is also grieving the death of her husband. She is the mother heir. So
Well, she's the consort to
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, she was the consort to, you know, the prior heir who just died. And so she has this amount of power, but she's also grieving and she's also going to use her power to get vengeance in a way where like she's doing it for the other side and kind of coming from her own terms, and seeing the way each of these women is like moving through the world was very interesting, and I thought a very effective way to do it, of like out of the many things we see about Mariko, we don't see her as a mother very often, but the other two, it's very much part of their personhood is the fact that they are mothers, and one of them lost a child and one of them is trying to make sure her child is safe no matter what happens.
I also think it's interesting from the standpoint of their relationships with each other, because Mariko and Fuji, they very much respect each other and listen to each other and support one another. As you previously said, Hannah, we see a lot of women supporting other women in this, which is great. But it's also interesting to see the relationship between Mariko and Oshida play out, because they were raised together as children and were kind of childhood friends slash frenemies type situation, and they end up really kind of being these two highly respected women within their communities, and they have this back and forth between them that is a little bit, you can't figure out what's going on necessarily, and they know how to work situations to their own benefit and everything. They're very smart, very calculating, and it's interesting from my standpoint to watch, because we have these three main characters of Fuji, Mariko, and Oshiba. It's interesting to see the support that we get with Fuji and Mariko, and then on the flip side, see the tension that there is with Mariko and Oshida, and how eventually Oshida does come through with, because she respects Mariko and can come to terms with the fact.
Stroke at the end.
Yes.
Well, and that's kind of like, there's such a belief in like a lot of throughout this, like we have certain characters who you're like, can you trust them? Can you not trust them? And I think it was so effective to kind of have like, no, Mariko, even though she has this frenemy relationship with Oshida, like there's still underlying respect there, which also happens with like when Blackthorn tries to double cross Toranaga, the other characters are like, what you're doing is terrible. How dare you? And it's like he's going about it, he's like saying it too loudly for them, where they're like, no, no, no. If you're going to try to do this, like you have to do it very lightly. You can't just like come to someone and be like, are you willing to let me swear to you? Like it's very interesting to see how the women do these like machinations and control their own power and wield their own sources of like political authority.
Yeah, because even like when Oshida is like, we request an audience. The heir requests an audience with the engine. And Mariko comes in and she's like, oh, she just wants to talk to me. So just stand there and shut up. Like, just let us talk.
Yeah. That's interesting. I will say, so there was a moment where Fuji is talking to Buntaru, and she kind of hints at a relationship between Blackthorn or Mariko, but I couldn't decide if that was what was going on, or she was trying to like say like, well, he doesn't sleep with me, he sleeps with like other consorts. I was really worried because like at that point,
I want to say that she was in the dark about that, honestly.
Okay.
Oh, I thought it was the opposite.
Oh, really?
I read it both ways in different moments. Like at one moment I was like, oh my gosh, is she like stirring the pot? And then in another moment I was like, well, it seems like maybe she was just trying to tell him like, he's been nice to me, you don't have to worry about me.
I kind of took it from this. I kind of took it from the standpoint of like, she didn't know what was going on, because even like after they sleep together the first time, Mariko and John, it's like, it seems like Fuji either doesn't know, or she thought that they were getting a woman to sleep with him, that they were like hiring someone. And so she's just like, oh, whatever. And so I don't know. I thought that maybe it was just like, she just kind of oblivious to what's actually happening here and thought that they hired someone. She thinks she's just doing her job, running the household.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can see how it would be taken the other way, though, trying to stir the pot a little bit, because we definitely do have a lot of people who are stirring the pot, because there's many other characters who are mentioning to Buntaro, like, yeah, look at your wife and the engine. They're getting along pretty well.
Yeah, and I don't think she would be like allowed to. She wasn't the kind of person who would like allow herself to outright lie to them, I don't think.
Yeah.
So it seemed my interpretation of it was she was trying to find a delicate way to phrase it without necessarily that wouldn't necessarily give her away, give away what was going on.
That makes a lot of sense, because
that also makes sense.
Very, very smart people who aren't gonna like say the wrong thing.
Yeah. Right. Because I mean, her husband obviously like suspects something at that time, but I remember being a little bit like I couldn't tell which. And then like I did change my mind towards the
because
end.
He's just like wildly jealous. So it's like, I think maybe that affected my opinion of it too. Where I was just like, gosh, this guy is a jealous a-hole. He cannot take it. Like, so I don't know if that also like colored my view of it or not.
What did you guys think about the like kind of the death poems and how death is viewed in the show overall?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I don't think it was glamorized, but I really like the way that it gets used as it's treated as just another sort of tool these people have, more powerful people have to sort of advance like their interests and everything. And I thought that was sort of a fascinating way of looking at it, as the various people like threaten to do that in order to help secure someone else's position as a sign of loyalty and everything. I thought that was a really interesting, like I hadn't seen that kind of thing before.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that the show handles death as well as religion very well, where it didn't feel like religion was something that was forced upon people. There were different Christian religions portrayed, and then I'm assuming also atheism by some of the ways that things were talked about. But I have a quote that Mariko says where she says that life and death are the same. They both can have value and purpose. And I thought that was like a perfect way to like sum up the way that they treated death, and how even if somebody were to die, it doesn't have to be a meaningless death. Like, you can have a purposeful death. You can contribute to the cause by dying. It's not something that we have to be like, well, that was pointless. Why did we just have this person sacrifice themselves or do this or whatever? And then it really became more meaningful when she ended up dying in the 9th episode.
And I also I really loved the use of the death poems, because it was a way to communicate like after death for Mariko, but even with like Yabashuga, he has his own one where he's like, this is what I created, I thought it was good. Like it's really sweet to be like, I know I'm walking into this with open eyes, and there's like there's such a decency in that and such beauty, and like it goes back to Mariko's line, a flower is only a flower because it falls. Like it's because like in Japanese culture, the belief is like flowers bear fruit. And so if they fall before they become fruitful, then they remain a flower. And it's like this, like, well, we are only beautiful because we are fleeting moment. And I loved the use of that imagery and that like I thought it was just so effective to kind of talk about the death poems in that light and see how they're used where like Mariko's is like it gives people the power to fight back and say like no more, this is ridiculous. And it was just really well done in my mind.
I thought it also had like a full circle moment too when Oshiba is talking about the poems with her son who is the heir.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, so then we're just bringing this into a new generation and someone who is going to have all this power. And I was like, that's a really good way to handle all of this. I thought it was well done too, Hannah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Yabashiga?
Yeah, let's
talk
about
I've been trying to look for an in this whole time.
Good. You start then.
I have so many thoughts. I really do I like speaking of Mariko's death scene, there's the bit where he's like stabs this dude to death, helps like the ninjas get in and everything, and then suddenly it's just like, oh no, how did they get in? Who could have done that? And then just like tries to help them escape and everything. Like he's constantly playing every single side, trying to secure like
he's such a little shit.
Literally. And it's like it would have been so easy to frame him as like a gigantic sort of double crossing piece of shit. But instead it's an incredibly sympathetic portrayal because it seems like he's the one person who kind of sees through it. There's a line one of the antagonists has in like the last episode when like they're going to declare war, where they're like the heir's banners will make our actions lawful. The fact that he doesn't have them is going to make them unlawful, and it's just sort of like, all right, cool, yeah, everyone who's going to die, it's okay because you have like the right colors on a banner, cool, love that. And it was like saying the quiet part out loud, where he was just whereas he was just Kashiki and everything was just kind of it's like he's constantly trying to he doesn't care which side is lawful as much as like which one has power and will make sure I don't die.
That's what his main goal is just to maintain. He doesn't care which side he's on, but he wants to be alive at the end of it. And that's what he cares about. And so he's literally willing to do just about anything to maintain that. And throughout the entire season, he's just like, what's that you wanted to hear, Lord? Oh yeah, that's what I said. And
then, you misunderstood me. This is actually what I'm for.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I gotta go over and talk to them. I'm totally telling them that I'm only on your side. And then he gets over there, he's like, totally on your side. They understand and are all for it. And it's like, gosh, he's playing both sides so well because all he cares about is maintaining his own.
I do find this character fascinating because you guys are both right. And like I don't want to like say this because I don't think it's a one-to-one with Game of Thrones, but he is a lot like a Littlefinger character where he's playing both sides. But like
the only thing is it's like interesting from the standpoint of like he's not pushing a political agenda. He's just trying to
survive. Like he's just being like, well, I have to be loyal to this person because that's what policy dictates. But at the same time, I know that this is all bullshit and I'm one of the plebeians who will die because of this. So like, is it worth my life to do this? But like we see time and time again that he does have a line, which I think is also interesting with these types of characters, where he's like, yeah, I'm not going to just let Blackthorn come over. Like, I'm going to be smart about this. Like, I'm going to be loyal to my lord as long as it's like not my life in the balance. Like, we're fine right now, but you need to be smarter about this. And to see his end where like he is a character who has been playing both sides the entire time, but he walks into his death openly. And he also has this very honest conversation with Toranaga at the end, where Toranaga kind of tells him everything almost. And then he's like, you could tell me a little, but not quite. Cause he's like, well, why would you tell me everything? And he's like, cause what would it matter? And that also shows
tell
like
a dead man.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
also shows like some of Toranaga's worst qualities as someone who's very Machiavellian and very much like
right.
I am here not for my own survival but for power. So you may mean nothing to me, even though this moment is amusing me. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more.
Yeah.
It shows that like he's been right all along to be a little bit like,
Suspicious, yeah.
yeah,
I know
He's
it's
completely
it's
willing to use everyone.
yeah.
yes. It's probably meant to see Ashido as Toranaga's like main foil, but I feel like in my mind, Yabashiga is almost a foil of Toranaga in himself because he's thought to be this really scheming person that we know everything about and all this, and that we're like, you can't trust him. He's up to something, like he's gonna double cross you. He always does. And he's also one of those people that even though he's like doing all this double crossing and everything, he never is able to predict that things are going to go wrong, and they almost always do. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
like he's always shocked by it, and he's kind of like, "Wow, I didn't think it was going to work out that way when I sold them out. That's not what we had intended. Whoops. I guess a bunch of people
He's
died. Oh,
he's like
that's not what I
surrounded by
expected."
heavier hitters. He's like he's
Mhm.
out of his weight class in terms of the people he's hanging around. But unlike them, he doesn't want like power or like more power than he has now. He's perfectly content with where he's at. He just wants to make it out in one piece.
Yeah, he's like,
Yeah.
"I'm fine
Whereas
with
like
this fishing village."
everyone else
Yeah.
wants to get up the social ladder, whereas he's just like, let me keep the fishing village and I'm good. Just like as long as I get to survive.
I just
Um,
want to play with some cannons for a little while. These seem fun.
I think there's interesting peeks into his character too, like a deeper look into his character where we have these moments between like him and John where he's trying to prove himself. He actually does want to like save the Spaniard at the beginning. Like
Mhm.
he's like, this is an important person. We're not wrong to try and save him. Like we should save him. And then he does, want to prove himself and be like, no, I should be the one to go down and do it. I'm the one who's in charge here. Like, not you, some random Englishman. You stay up here. You are going to sell us out, and I know more about selling out than anyone. So, so there's like those type of moments, but I think it's also interesting when we see like the dynamic between him and his nephew, who is his heir, where we kind of are introduced to the nephew thinking like this guy is a conniving little twerp
Ah.
that he's
yeah,
going to do about anything. And we find out the relationship between uncle and nephew. They're very close, and that Kashigi, he thinks of Omi as his son practically. And it's like,
right.
well, now we have kind of learned where a lot of these
Yeah,
like twisting of situations and words comes from because
yeah,
this Yabashiga line is really passing that on from generation to generation. And I really think that those were some interesting glimpses into Kashigi's character to see a little more behind the curtain of like these are things that make him who he is. He has this pride, he has this loyalty to his own family, and he's willing to teach them also to do whatever you can to maintain, persevere.
yeah,
Yeah, which is also you're right. It's such a foil to Toranaga because we see moments where like his son wants the same power that he has, but he's really dumb about it. Like
yeah,
he kills people he shouldn't kill. And like
right.
where I think Yabashiga would be like much more empathetic towards his nephew because you see that he does genuinely love his nephew. Toranaga is like,
He's like, I've got
how
other
are you?
sons.
You fucked
Yeah, I
up.
have other sons. You could die and I don't care. Where like he doesn't defend him and like it's all
I love the
pawns to him.
interplay
Yeah.
with
Well, and
those
for
two characters because like he doesn't because if he doesn't care, that's of course why he's doing these things and acting out and trying to do big bold things to like cement himself. And then he's like, "Why are you doing all these attention grabbing things to try
Mhm.
like these? Why do you keep doing this?" And it's like, well, I wonder why that might be.
Mhm.
well, and we
Yeah.
also have like with Yabashiga, it's like we see who he is. He shows us who he is time and time again. And we know that this is what we get with him versus Toranaga, who we think we know what we're getting, but there are all these layers hidden behind this person who is supposed to be honorable and is supposed to be always doing the right thing, never lying or whatever. And he's so scheming and so manipulative and so uncaring about even his own son, to the point where it's just like, thanks for dying, kid. You gave me a little more time to work on my plan. And it's like, oh my gosh. So it's interesting too to see the difference between Yabashige and Toranaga, where Yabashige puts it all out on the table. He's like, this is who I am. Sorry, I'm backstabbing you, but I gotta do what I gotta do. And Toranaga's like, I'd never backstab you. I'm just mourning my son.
Yeah.
Well, and that's like, by the end, you just have to go against everything Toranaga says. Because like in the final scene, when I saw that Blackthorn's ship was sunk, I was like, well, that was Toranaga. Like that was 1,000% him.
Right.
And when he revealed it, I was like, that's not a reveal. Like everyone knew. And I think that that's the point, is like, you have these characters who are so out in the open, but like Toranaga, you keep thinking he's just behind the scenes, but if you pick the treacherous option, that's the one he chose. There was never a moment he didn't pick the treacherous option.
It's so interesting though, like how as the show progresses, we start to peel off the layers of Toranaga and we finally see like, oh no, he's actually kind of a bad guy. Like,
he's been a piece of shit the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, what? We thought he was great. We thought he was just a hottie. Oops. We are mistaken. And
we're mistaken.
So I actually really appreciated the end scene with him and Yabashige, where even at the end, he's revealing a lot of his plan and a lot of the things that he's done, but he won't reveal the whole thing, which is good from like the writing standpoint, where they're like, in case we get a second season, we don't want to deliver the whole plan. But also from the standpoint of like, no, he's, even in this man's death, his final moments, he's still not going to give him even a kernel of this plan.
Respect.
He's like, nope, you're not getting that. And Yabashige is basically just like, well, here it comes. I guess this is the end.
He's like so existential throughout. Like there's like a weird existentialism to his character the whole time. Like Kashiki, I mean, with the whole there's so many scenes of him being like, well, we're fucked, just immediately, and then just throwing a temper tantrum about it, usually by picking on Blackthorn.
Yeah.
And like, I liked how often he would just like talk at him, even though he knew he couldn't understand a word he was saying. There was so many, like, I really love those moments of just like, he's constantly just sort of like, for someone who expects the worst, you would expect him to kind of anticipate more of like these moments where things blow up in his face. But it's like he's both existential and knows that he's fucked, but also doesn't quite know how someone's gonna fuck him over next.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because he has all these moments where he has like close calls where he's like, "Uh-oh, I'm gonna die. Somebody do it this way. Like, just why don't we go over here and you can tell him that we're gonna do this or whatever." And then he worms his way out of it somehow, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, I intended for this to happen. Haha." And he's like, we were working together, me and Anjin. We totally meant for this to happen. Ha ha ha.
I wasn't just gonna desert him. No, totally not.
No, never.
And then he'll just like talk to me like, planned it, right? We planned it. Yeah.
Right.
Friends, okay. And Blackthorn's just like, sure, whatever. And there's also like a respect that develops between the two of them early on in that moment where they're trying to save the Spaniard. And I think that from the beginning, there may be some of the closest allies, Yabashige and Blackthorn, because of that moment where they both have this sort of toxic masculinity about them, where it's like the only things that they find like honorable is like, we're gonna save a fellow crew member, somebody who's useful. That's the man thing to do. And
all these other people who died, who gives a shit?
Yeah, so they have this like common ground where they're like, we're both honorable, and they can see that in each other, and so then they develop like this kinship right away, honestly. And they often are like drawn back to each other and are kind of like, but no, we actually are going to be allies. And as viewers, it's kind of like, the unlikeliest duo is always drawn together.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so the show has so many different like layers to it. I feel like we could unpack like so much of it, but Toranaga's family alone like lends itself to like his brother 2 times him, but his brother is also like obsessed with
brother.
him. half brother, but like
which
his
I
brother
think is
comes
an
up
important
to him.
note that he's a half brother.
But like he double crosses him, and then Toranaga, but like even in that moment, like that he's double crossing him, he's sitting there like giving him all the compliments, and he's just like,
Right.
well, we're just powerful enough that we can do this to each other, and it doesn't matter. And I think that's why like Yabashuga and Blackthorn have this kinship, is they know that like they are pawns. They just have the
Right.
self-reflection to realize like these people who are higher above us have the power. We're just lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
They're around the same sort of like station in terms of like power, social status versus the other, like Toranaga and his brother are able to do similar things, but they couldn't punch. It's one of those things where you can punch like in your weight class, but you can't really punch down. You could punch up, but that would not be wise.
Yeah. I think that Toranaga is like so interesting though, and that actor, I am in love with him. He's so good.
Well, you just talked about how good looking he was.
Yeah, I went into this thinking, okay, there's the hottie, so but and I ended thinking, okay, he's still a hottie.
Scary hottie.
I got nervous when he was coughing. I was like, no. But he is such an interesting character, and I really like to see how he's given a lot more depth than just being the kind of ruler who is considered just super honorable and everyone loves him because he always does the right thing. And I love that he's, using people as pawns. He's like, I do not care about Blackthorn. Like, he's just funny. Like, I am just using him. I'm just gonna get rid of his ship because you know what I need? Somebody to help me build a whole fleet. Like, we're just gonna manipulate this whole situation. And I also think that his relationship with his son, who has a tragic, absolutely shocking death. That was probably the most shocking thing that happened in the whole season for me was Toranaga's son, Nagakato, is that his name? His death, because while we see Toranaga being this person who's very composed and calculating, who never really shows his cards, his oldest son, who is always with him, is always quick to anger, quick to stand up for what is right, and he's going to like go to battle and do this and honor his family, honor his father. And it's so shocking for him to die slipping on a rock and crushing his head like that.
I think it's almost like a metaphor for his whole personality of like not watching his footing, and then suddenly that's what dooms him. It's even like you see glimpses of that. It's almost foreshadowed in the meeting with his brother, where he gets handed the note being like, you have to commit seppuku in the morning, and then it's Toranaga who's like, don't accept that. You can just say no as long as you have enough power behind the refusal to back it up. You only have to do something that drastic. That's for other people's
right.
Having to kill yourself to advance a cause. That's for the commoners. That's for people with less power than we have.
It's so true though, because like even when the half brother like has the moment where he sees Omi, I think is what is up on FX as a name, so that'll is what I will use. But like he oh no, it's Yukikara. You're right. When he dies, like the half brother is like, that was anticlimactic. It's a moment that means very little. Like it's and it was shocking. Like I gasped when that happened.
That was probably like there were certain things that you could call, like you mentioned, Hannah, like at the end when he's mentioning like, oh yeah, I was the one that got rid of the engine's ship. Like we don't want that. It was like, yeah, obviously he did that. But I think when Toranaga's son dies that way, that was one of the most shocking things that I did not expect. I was not going into this thinking like, oh, nobody's going to die. And I probably could have guessed even that kid would die. But the way that it happened was just so like, oh, what a gut punch. And the way that the episode ended was eerily quiet with the water running and everything. And I think it was just an interesting way to portray how, like you said, Connor, that moving too quickly and not biting our tongue can get us in big trouble. And how Toranaga was able to even manipulate his own son's death to his benefit and use that as an opportunity to buy him more time and to again worm his way into a situation where he would have the upper hand. And he did. And it shows how meaningless, honestly, his relationship with his son was too to him, because he's just kind of like, well, thanks for furthering my cause. Glad I have another baby that's gonna be making his way this way soon. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I sorry, I lost my train of thought. I had something else that I wanted to bring up about Toranaga. Oh, the fact that this show did such an effective job in the first 3 episodes to really make you think that like Toranaga wasn't really in it for the power. Like they have moments where he's like flashing back with
he's considered like a victim at the beginning.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, we keep hearing from all of these people who want to impeach him, like he's going for power. He's going to do this. And you're saying they're like, no, he was like really close with the heir's father. And he was like talking to him about the reason to have the 5 regents. And he agreed with them.
Well, and we get this backstory too, where we kind of learn like he was thrust into power at a really young age. So obviously he feels conflicted about taking more power because he wouldn't want it. He didn't want it as a child, Lord, and all this. And it's like,
so we like kind of figure out the truth along with Blackthorn. Like as time goes on, when he's like, this guy's not trustworthy, we're all like, oh gosh, like it was Agatha all along moment.
Yeah. Well, and Yabashika at the end, he's like, you're no different from the rest of us.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, you just wanted power too. Or was that Blackthorn that says that? I can't remember who it is.
It wasn't Blackthorn.
It was Yabashika. Okay.
Yeah.
Where he says at the end, he's like, you just wanted power too. You're no different than anyone. And Toranaga is just basically like, you know it, bro. Like,
but I'm better at it.
And
I like
so
that.
Smart.
There's like that backstory where he's offered the title of Shogun and he turns it down because he's just like, I don't want that target on my back. If I'm gonna become Shogun, I gotta stack those dominoes in the right place first. Like, I gotta keep like But he pretends it's because, I would never. I'm just so loyal to you. I could never. Like, I can't. I don't.
I have
want
to
them
kill all my
scheming against
enemies
me.
first.
Right? Yeah.
Well,
he doesn't take it and he frames it as loyalty, but then he's just like, no, I gotta get the right hand before I have that much power.
Yes.
Well, and he plays it just right because like throughout the entire thing, everyone knows what other characters are doing. Like the fact that there are these people who are not allowed to leave the castle. They are political prisoners and they just won't say it out loud. They're like, no, everyone is welcome to leave at any moment. You just need to get a permit. It's not that big of a deal. And like everyone knows exactly what they're saying when they say those things. But like Toranaga, no one knows. They're all like, what is he going to do next? So he outplays everyone, and it's like he
his
outplays
own people
the audience
are even
in the
begging
beginning.
him. They're like, tell me, what is your plan? I need to know. Like, I can't figure it out.
There's so many scenes. Well, I really like how much you have to like how much attention is dependent on people having to dance around the obvious thing that's happening because it would be impolite to say so. Like it's just there's so many times where they just hire a bunch of bandits to murder people on the road, and then they murder the bandits, and it's just sort of like, you know who did this. Everyone knows like what happened. No, it's just but like no one really says or does anything about it because like they've taken the customary half step away from responsibility in order to distance yourself. And it's like that's constantly happening. Is they can't just make an accusation. You have to maneuver your way into like at an angle into suggesting it through your actions in this indirect way. And the whole thing is like a weird logic puzzle you have to navigate.
Yeah.
Yes. I also think there's an interesting like way that Mariko brings up like the way that their homes are built and rebuilt after storms, where they have to like have homes that can go up quickly and that they also go down quickly. And I think that that's a unique way to look at the political happenings within the different clans, and especially like what's happening specifically within Toranaga's clan, where they are going through a lot of storms, things like they're losing people. They lost a bunch of people in that village, and then they had to just like build up again. And then they had another storm. They had to just build up again. And they're constantly seeing these storms that are occurring. And then they have to continue to rebuild their home, which is their clan. And they keep moving on. They keep persevering. And I thought that was a unique call out and an interesting way to look at their specific situation with Toranaga.
Oh, agreed.
It's become like a sort of metaphor for like power destabilizing.
Yes.
And the need to adapt to like how like the change in circumstance.
Did anybody
That's
have
really
like
great.
a favorite moment
Oh God.
or episode?
I like the dinner scene, I think, the best, just because I think that was one of the big moments where like a lot of the ongoing tensions were coming together into one thing. And I think the that was one of the points where I think it executed a lot of the layers going on in the most sort of satisfying, nerve-wracking kind of way.
Yeah.
As soon as he started reaching for that bow, I was like glued to my screen, and it's like, oh God,
Gosh.
they're gonna do the William Tell thing, but he's drunk. Oh no.
Mhm.
I was so worried for her. But then later, like it's this very tragic moment where like he successfully puts the arrow through. He can do this. Like you find out he's much like stronger and like even when drunk. But then later
Right.
he beats his wife because she shamed him in some way that she didn't. She was being respectful in any way she
Right.
could. It's a heartbreaking moment. It's a high tension scene. That's a good scene to pick.
Yeah.
What about you, Hannah?
I don't know. I really love just the juxtaposition with like I oh my gosh, just the beginning, I think with the scene with Toranaga with the Shogun where he's telling him like I would never want this role.
Mhm.
Why would I ever do that? Mixed with the ending scene. I think those two as like parallels to one another were definitely some of my favorite moments just to kind of see we were almost tricked all along and he finally admitted it out loud after we saw a season of us like deconstructing everything we knew. I thought that was just so effectively done. So those will probably be my favorites. But what about you, Laura?
I think some of my, I'm just to like say something different because I think Toranaga's moments were maybe my favorite. Toranaga and Yabashiga, like anytime they were on screen, I was like, I love this show. But
Secret Samurais and like all of them. Like,
I think that was cool too. I think just to like bring up something a little bit different, I thought that when Mariko was trying to like escape from Ishido's capture, basically, they're saying, oh, you know, you're not being held here, you can get out. And she has this moment where she's like, I have to leave, I have to serve my lord. And they have like all these people around her that are taken down, and then she is given a weapon and tries to fight. I like that they actually let a woman fight in this, and I also like that it didn't become a situation where it was like, oh, she fought her way out, she did it, she took down 100 men by herself in a dress. And it's like, no, this is realistic where she
this is modern feminism talking. But
no, I do like that it was something where it was like, no, it became a realistic situation where it was like
chicken.
Yeah, like she even says, "There's no way anyone can fight off all these men." It's like, obviously, like
but they're
that
not
was
allowed
just
to kill her or harm her.
Yes.
So it's just they're in this weird stalemate of she's trying to sort of, she can't fight her way out, but she has to put herself in danger while looking like she's trying to bait them into some sort of offense that will allow her to claim that she's a hostage. But they're not allowed to actually hurt her, and it's this weird. It's such a weird game of chicken, and I really like that scene. That was incredible.
I thought that was a really good one, and even like the time building up to like her attempting to like commit seppuku, like I was like, oh, there's all this back and forth and everything, and I thought the moment where John finally is like, you know what, I'm going to accept that she is going to be saddled with eternal damnation because of her religion, even though that I don't have the same religion, I will step in and be the one who is her second when the other person does not show up to do it. I thought that was a unique moment too. Obviously she saved just in the nick of time, but I thought that all of that like back and forth of like, uh-oh, this is happening, like you said, a game of chicken that's going on for a long time. It was really well done.
I agree.
I really like they I thought that I was nervous that they were going to kill Mariko at first. And I remember I was on the edge of my seat. They're not going to do it. There's no way. And then you think she's safe when she doesn't have to kill herself, and then she ends up dying anyway. It made that moment hit so much harder because you think like it's such a sucker punch because you feel like she's safe because you just had that moment where she survives, but then she ends up dying anyway, and it's like shit.
I knew she was going to die. I was
knew
like,
she was
nope,
going
that
to
bitch
die
is going to
too.
die.
I figured she was going to make it out. Or at least I
No.
wanted her to make it out.
I mean, she's such an important part of the entire storyline. So
Yeah,
it's just, it's
thematically, it does
amazing.
make more sense for her to die. It wouldn't. It would. The story would be saying something fundamentally different if she made it out.
Yeah.
I also thought
yeah.
she was going to die, but I thought that it was nice that they didn't just give it to us right there, like you're saying, Kevin,
Yeah.
that they drew it out a little bit. So it did kind of fake us out a few times where it was like, oh, is she going to die here when she's fighting all these people? Oh, is she going to die here when she's committing suicide honorably? Oh, no, it's actually she's going to get blown up is how she's going to die. And I did appreciate that. I didn't like how they had to have the moment, of course, of John like holding her body.
Just
like,
stay with me. Like
the weirdest scream.
Never let
oh
go.
Gosh. It was so
that was too much for me, but
I do kind of get why he's this attached to her, because it's just like the one person that he can actually communicate with.
He has,
yeah, so it makes sense that
he
he's going to
struggles a
attach
sense of belonging throughout the whole season,
Yeah.
where
And even
he
like
even go ahead.
No, it feels like like there's the whole thing where she's the only one he can communicate with, and also he grew up in a very misogynistic society, so it's just like, oh, a woman I can actually communicate with, I must be in love with her. It's
Yeah.
what I felt was going on there.
Oh yeah. No, for sure.
That's absolutely correct. I think I'm just getting a little too annoyed by the romance storyline of it all.
No,
it's a terrible romance.
get it.
And like again, Blackthorn is the most boring character. We talked about that. And he's the most frustrating character, where you have that moment where he like goes back to see his old crew.
Yeah, and he's like, I don't belong here anymore with these people. I don't belong with the people that I thought were my people, and now
we weren't recording, but the look on his face through a lot of this season was like, could you emote other than shock in like any scene where he's just like, you're just like sitting there slack-jawed, like, not reacting. And there's a moment where like a lot of his stuff just didn't have the actual feeling of someone who's like isolated. Like I feel like the actor didn't always portray it the best, where like it's this moment where we're supposed to feel like, oh my gosh, my people are not great. They're like drinking lots of sake, they're being ruckus, they're like imposing on these like Japanese people's culture. And like you see the guy trying to like have sex with this woman who doesn't really want it. And like I'm appreciative that they didn't show the violence against women for no reason, but like he beats up this guy, and there was a moment where I was like, well, you only spoke to one of them. What if he's the dick of the crew? Like,
yeah.
I don't care if one guy was mean. I care if the entire crew was mean. You're seeing them at the worst possible moment when people are drunk, and you're having this like, I don't belong with them anymore. I'm like, I don't believe you. Like it didn't feel
they didn't play that well, because I think what they're trying to do is play this whole like sense of belonging, and him trying to figure out, he's like in this in-between space. Where does he actually belong? He doesn't belong with the Japanese, he doesn't belong with his own people anymore. But you're right, Hannah, they don't play it well enough, because it's like he gives like a 2-second chance to see like, can I reconnect with my people? And he's just like, nope, I can't reconnect with that horrible rapist guy. Like I can't reconnect with him. And so then he immediately gives up, and it's like, oh, well, I don't know. But
there seem to be third options. I don't think you were looking that hard.
But it does make sense for him to be so attached to Mariko, like you said, Connor, because she is that connecting piece for him, to kind of give him a sense of belonging and somebody that he feels connected to.
Yeah. It's like the only person there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that I wish there was a bit more with like attempts to overcome the language barrier stuff, because that was those scenes where they had to do that were some of the more interesting ones. And I do kind of wish there was more of that, but I can see how it would kind of bog things down from like a pacing perspective and things like that.
I do appreciate that they showed him trying to learn the language instead of him trying to teach
that was a
people
good
to
arc.
speak English.
I appreciated that too. That it was like they weren't going to be trying too hard to learn English. He had to adapt to them. And I think that was a good piece of his character growth, was that like towards the end, he's actually, they're like saying, oh, look at you. You're learning some phrases, smart little guy. And they say a meaner thing. But so I did think it was nice though that the show showed that, where it's like he actually is trying to learn Japanese and learn some phrases because he needs to be able to communicate and immerse himself within this community.
Hilariously amusing to me that they were like, look, we will have Japanese people speaking Japanese, we will have English, our line is Portuguese, we're not going to have people
have that be English. What?
I was thinking about that when they first came on. I was like, why aren't they speaking Spanish? What is this? These aren't Englishmen.
Very wild choice, but
I know.
always amusing.
Can you imagine
That was a weird choice.
like being in Blackthorn's position? Finally, he's like, oh my God, a European, thank God. And then he speaks Portuguese.
Oh gosh, that would be so.
I can't even communicate with this guy.
Yeah, it's wild, but overall, I think the show is really well done.
Yes.
I was surprised that they're giving it a second season, but I'm interested to see where it goes, like outside of all of the source material and seeing how they kind of expand this world. Because we even got like a flash forward of what happens to Blackthorn in the future.
I did not like that.
I mean, if you think about it from a series finale, of course they had a flash forward because you have to know he gets out alive. But then they were like season 2 and 3. And I'm like, well, all you've done is tell people that like, hey, through all of this, Blackthorn will not die. So which also least interesting person to know that about.
So it doesn't necessarily matter as much that he makes it out alive, but it does sort of spoil the idea that it's like, well, now we know how the whole, like where he ends up. I mean, apparently he worked out his crisis of identity eventually.
Yeah, he went back to those soldiers eventually, as they always do. They don't
mention what the swords were, do they?
I don't think so. I think they just say that he was given to him.
The grandkids just mentioned that he was given those by a samurai or something.
Yeah, by some great hero or something, and we don't actually see it. I can see why they ended it where they did, just from a character perspective, because if he's like, they ended it where it seems pretty thematically appropriate that like he knows he has the power he needs to win the war, and unless things shift too much, which they could, I guess, and I can see how that would make for a good season 2. But I like the ending of you know he's going to be able to win if it comes to war. You don't have to actually see that process play out because he already has the resources he need, and it's been about acquiring those resources, not necessarily about fighting a war, because that's not what the story has been about.
It's interesting. Any final thoughts on the show that you feel like we haven't talked about?
I can't think of any, but I'm just curious for season 2 because honestly, I thought this would have been just fine as a 1 season.
Yeah,
thing.
I'm a little like I always feel a little hesitant when people are like, "This was so good, it needs more," and I'm like, maybe it was so good because it didn't.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But
I'm curious. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Me
but
too.
Also, banging opening. I think I watched the opening. That was
the music
and
costumes were great, and like all of the all of
the
cinematography.
Well. You could see what was happening in the dark.
It was lit well. The beautiful mountain scenes, like you could tell they were doing so many on like scene locations. Oh my gosh, it was gorgeous. So
and I also thought like the score and everything was just perfectly like tied into what was happening, and like even in that scene where Tornaga's son dies, they like cut the music and it's just silent. All you can hear is the water flowing.
They knew they had a wham moment.
Perfect.
Oh, it's so good. All right. Well, Connor, thank you so much for coming on to discuss with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Can you tell people where they can find you online?
I am at CM Caplan Writes on Twitter, and I don't know, no one uses Bluesky anymore, but you can find me there as well occasionally. And the CM Caplan on like Instagram and I don't know, probably Facebook or some other shit. Mostly I'm on Twitter. You can buy The Fall Is All There Is on Amazon, rated on Goodreads and things like that. And book 2 is coming out early 2025.
Cannot wait for that. Make sure you check out Connor's episode with us where they discuss their books. The Fall Is All There Is. So.
And we had Connor on for Wheel of Time episode
as
well. Another TV Tuesday.
Oh, so good. Too. And we also had an episode over on Patreon where we broke down the second half of the season. So you've been on quite a bit, and we love having you.
One of our favorites.
So, and you can find us everywhere on at OW. Oh, sorry, I really messed that up. At OWWR Pod, Our Pod, or you can check out our reading schedule at ourpod.com. You can join us tomorrow for our regularly scheduled content. All right. Well, with that, I hope everyone has seen Shogun because boy, did we do a deep dive into it.
Yeah.
Connor, you'll have to come on when season 2 is out.
Oh, hell yeah.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.